Good evening. I'm David Cataforis, Professor and Chair of Art History at the University of Kansas. I would like to acknowledge that the University of Kansas resides on the ancestral territory of the Kaw people, who were forced off their land by the United States in the 19th century and largely relocated to Oklahoma. This acknowledgement recognizes Native Americans as traditional guardians of the land and the enduring relationship between Native peoples and these traditional territories. Indigenous peoples of many tribes live in Kansas today, and the state is home to 4 federally recognized tribes: the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, the Kickapoo Tribe in Kansas, the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. I'm pleased to welcome you to this evening's lecture by the internationally renowned artist and distinguished KU alumnus, Hockey AV Edgar Heap of Birds, who is the creator of the 2021-22 Common Work of Art, Native Hosts. This lecture is sponsored by the Franklin D. Murphy Lecture Fund and Spencer Museum of Art, and hosted by the Spencer Museum, KU's Crest Foundation Department of Art History, and the graduate students of the History of Art, Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion Committee, in partnership with Haskell Indian Nations University and the KU First Nations Student Association. The impetus to invite Edgar Heap of Birds to speak came from the graduate students of the History of Art DEAI Committee, and I'm pleased to acknowledge their members' enthusiastic efforts to help organize this event, along with those of my colleague Susan Earle, Spencer Museum of Art Curator of European and American Art, who has a longstanding professional relationship with Edgar Heap of Birds and extended the invitation to him to speak. Many others also deserve thanks for their involvement in the planning, including Art History Department Office Manager Lisa Clore and Spencer Museum of Art graphic designer Jeffrey McKee, who designed the poster. And now it is my pleasure to turn the screen over to KU doctoral student Diarlyn Bell, who is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and a public administration and law and society scholar in the School of Public Affairs and Administration, and she will introduce the artist.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction. So Hock IEV, Edgar Heap of Birds, is an artist and an advocate for Indigenous communities worldwide. His work includes multidisciplinary forms of public art messages, large-scale drawings, new series acrylic paintings, prints, works in glass, and monumental porcelain enamel on steel outdoor sculpture. Heap of Birds' artistic creations were shown in the 2007 Venice Biennale. While representing Indigenous communities, his art focuses first on social justice and on the personal freedom to live within the tribal circle as an expressive individual. His work has been exhibited at some of the most renowned institutions in the world, including the Museum of Modern Art, Orchard Gallery in Northern Ireland, the Cheyenne and Arapaho Nations Reservation in Oklahoma, Site Santa Fe Museum in New Mexico, Grand Palais in Paris, France, and the Documenta in Kassel, Germany. His work holds a place in the collections of many museums, such as the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City, Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, and the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. Most recently, his work appears in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, the British Museum in London, Anchorage Museum in Alaska, and the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. In 2012, he was named a USA Ford Fellow, and in 2014, he was honored as a distinguished alumni from the University of Kansas. He has received grants and awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Andy Warhol Foundation, Bond Fee Stanton Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trust, AT&T, Lila Wallace Foundation, Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation. So sharing his expertise and talent with the next generation of artists, Heap of Birds has taught at Yale University, Rhode Island School of Design, University of Cape Town, and the University of Oklahoma. Now retired from teaching at the University of Oklahoma after 30 years of service, he continues to serve there as Professor Emeritus. Heap of Birds received his bachelor's degree from the University of Kansas. Before earning his master's degree from the Tyler School of Art, he completed graduate level study at the Royal College of Art in London. He holds honorary doctorate fine arts and letters degrees from Massachusetts College of Arts and Design in Boston, Emily Carr University of Art and Design in Vancouver, Canada, and the California Institute of the Arts in Valencia. This year, the Spencer selected a series of 5 panels created by Heap of Birds titled Native Host for the KU Common Work of Art. The panels name Native tribes who historically or currently inhabit the region and aim to remind viewers of the displacement of Native Americans from their homelands, as well as their continued presence in the Americas. The panels have received considerable attention this year on campus and have been the source of really important conversations confronting issues such as Native identity and representation, the need for more cultural competency among some in our community, colonization, and Native erasure. But the panels have, in some ways, also solidified the Indigenous community here at KU and Haskell, and brought awareness to the fact that Native people are still here, and we are active contributors to our areas of study and to the larger community. So, I mean, art has this way of doing many different things for many different people at the same time. And Heap of Birds' work here is no different. So with that, is my absolute joy and honor to introduce to you Hock Edward Heap of Birds.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Can we have the first slide, please? Yeah, there we go. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And it's great to have the support of the students. And I asked for that at the Spencer to have students direct this effort, and I'm really proud to have the input from the Haskell students, the KU students, the art history students, and so forth. Wonderful. My perspective starts with sovereignty and I guess identity, but I have to say that it comes from the land, and I do really encourage everyone to, no matter what race you are, but I think you have to have a piece of land or an experience with the earth that you love. You know, particularly if you're native, if you're going to make art about identity or issues of equality, equity, whatnot. You can't do it with just as an intellectual exercise. I really believe that native life comes from the earth and remains with the earth, you know, primarily. And that's why I live in Oklahoma, and I do travel the world and do projects all over the world. But I live in Oklahoma tonight, talking to you. So the first slide is the horizon, looking west, sunset toward Concho, Oklahoma, our reservation area, looking from Oklahoma City, looking to the west. And so that kind of perspective of the horizon is so key to our tribal artwork. A lot of geometrical things are happening with our traditional artwork because of the horizon, the mountains, and so on. So again, the reference is the earth for our visual art. Okay, next please. Here's a more intimate photograph of the Red Rock, and so we live in Oklahoma and Kansas as well. When you're living on a inland sea, millions of years ago you would have been underwater, and that's why it's so flat. But here we have a lot of sand that was once a sea, and I really enjoy, you know, that earth color, that red color. This is photographed at my mother's ancestral homeland for the Arapaho people west of Gary, Oklahoma. And I lived there for over 10 years on the reservation, just in a very rural 500-acre zone of wildlife and nature. And I began painting there and moved back from the East Coast after my graduate studies. Okay, next please. As I lived there on the reservation and I hunted, I had dogs and I hunted with my animals, and we hiked the miles of canyon, and we encountered these juniper trees, which actually aren't from Oklahoma. They were brought in, but they give me a very, very interesting sensibility of the shapes and the forms that later became a way to inform my painting. Okay, next, please. Here's a juniper tree that has died. My son Heap of Birds took this photograph, and this is actually south of where the Cheyenne are from, Arapaho are from. This is Kiowa Comanche territory, Mount Scott, down by Lawton, Oklahoma, and Anadarko, Oklahoma. But you can see some of the horizon and just the nature. And this will be a shape that you might recall when you see my paintings. Next, please. And that's the first painting I made in Oklahoma. It would have been made in about 1982. And I made a canvas. I had a canvas, and I made an easel and took it down in the canyon around sunset and painted that little painting. And I call it Noof. And that word in Cheyenne is do something 4 times. So now I make 4 Noof paintings, whether they're 10 feet wide or 10 inches wide. But that's the first one created. And so my premise to show this tonight is, I love this land, I love this place, the tribe, the community, and that's what empowers me to go forward to make the political interventions such as native hosts. The painting came first. The land locator being taught by the land and the earth and the elements, the cold, the heat, the ice, the rain, the snow, the moonlight, the stars. They taught me a lot, the most. And of course, along with that came understanding from the tribal elders, going through the earth renewal ceremony for 16 years, dancing. Now I'm an elder. Now I'm the instructor to carry a young man through the ceremony. And my life is dedicated to that. And that's very important. But the land really taught me what I needed to know in a large sensibility. Next to the painting, to the right of the painting, is one of my vases, which was actually created in Italy, in Murano, and it was done in homage to Buffalo Bill's warriors who died in the Wild West shows when they traveled Europe, and those are the bodies going across. But they kind of are reminiscent of the shapes of my paintings too. So that's from not 2007. The painting's from 1982. Okay, next, please. And now you see the Noof series progress. I've jumped many years. This is 1994, and I really do have a strong allegiance to the abstraction, and they've been influenced by, like I said, the trees, the land, the clouds, the birds, my dogs running, me walking, and then also later they became influenced by the tropical seas, and so the sea is very much close to me, to be in the Caribbean or to be in the Gulf of Thailand or to be in the Great Barrier Reef. And so the reef, the coral, and the fish. But along with this practice, you have to really, as an artist, you want to be standing within your realm of art. You want to be, it's not a native practice at all. This is a pursuit of abstraction that has been going on for centuries, but it is a contemporary idiom, and so I do find myself in the company of great painters, and so this painting is collected by the St. Louis Museum of Art. And then next slide, please. And so I was exhibited in the Contemporary Gallery at the St. Louis Museum of Art. On the right is one of the most prominent painters in the world. His name is Bryce Martin, and he does a lot of sort of calligraphic imagery, and his very, very well-respected paintings are worth $500,000 or whatever. I mean, not that that's an issue, but it has that much respect. So my work has been exhibited in the same room, and I feel like it's held its own with painters such as Bryce Martin. And the next slide. Another great painter is Joan Mitchell, and really wonderful painter, abstract painter. And so, and candidly, frankly, I was very nervous to be pitted with these artists in the St. Louis Museum of Art, but I feel very happy that the work spoke for itself and was in good company and did well in that gallery. Okay, next, please. And this is another Neuf painting. This was probably 1995, and this is very large. It's 89 inches tall and 105 inches wide. And so I have a big studio space, and I painted these for about 5 years. There's about maybe 12 of these paintings. I paint 4 at a time. So there were 4 of these this size, and I had a major show in New York, in Chelsea, and one was collected out of that grouping. So again, these paintings are originally from the land of Oklahoma, Shawanoe territory, my great grandmother's land, and now they've progressed into a language that I carry with me across the world to make paintings with. And next, please. This is a newer one. This is probably 2000, maybe in 2, and it's a little bit smaller, 36 by 44, 42, and it's called Neufs for Autumn. And so I started working on paintings that had to do with color limitations and to make my mission more interesting and to discover new ideas through the color. So I worked mainly with autumn hues of color, the reds and oranges and so on. Okay, next, please. And again, I mentioned the reef. This is a reef off of Indonesia, and I traveled to Indonesia. I've been in Bali, Lombok, Java, Sumatra, and so this kind of life and being with your family, snorkeling, swimming with the fish, your mammals in the ocean. We travel together across the world to the Caribbean, to Mexico, and we enjoy being sort of other fish, I guess, in the sea. Next, please. This is a master artist I met in Sumatra. I was there witnessing wonderful weavings on Lake Toba in northern Sumatra. And so a big part of my practice and my life is to exchange with contemporary artisans and artists across the globe, particularly from indigenous populations. And so whenever I'm out moving up, I'm working in Africa, working in Thailand, working in Australia, I'm going to go there to offer my Shine Arapaho understanding, and then to exchange that for the tribal understandings that they have. And it's been a wonderful trek from all across this globe, and I continue it to this day. I'll be in Hawaii again in a few weeks on Kona, painting and meeting with tribal artists in Hawaii. But this is off Lake Toba in northern Sumatra. Okay, next, please. And that's a painting I did from that time frame of being in Indonesia. It's the Neuf paintings in blues, and I did a project at Pomona College of Art and Pitzer College in Los Angeles. And so that's about 36 by 42, maybe 2008. And I made 4 of these paintings. And I worked with a tribal elder from the Tongva Nation of California, Julia Bagani, and we worked together on interventions of native host sign panels. You'll see in a minute. And I did paintings, and she wanted to work with blue because blue is a very much, for her and many people, a renewing color of water. Okay, next, please. And then, yeah. This is a photograph from just a few weeks back. We were between St. John and St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, and my daughter is 12 years old, and my wife and I, and we swam together in this sea, and witnessed the fish and the coral, and I painted there as well. So the land of the earth is very significant to me, and of course the sea is a major part of the earth. We have much more sea than we have land, and so I've tried to really learn about the sea and to be in that realm as well. Next, please. And that's a small painting I made in Hawaii. I painted in Oahu, and I've been painting recently on small wooden panels. This is a 12 by 16 inch panel. And so I find, my life there in the waters and living on the ocean, and dealing with, wonderful communications with tribal people in the Hawaiian Islands, from Kauai to Oahu to the Big Island. All these things are very, very renewing to me. And so I can interpret that as a painting. And this is a small painting, wood panel. I'm taking the panels with me to Hawaii, and then I'm painting on the back porch. It's called a lanai, and I'm painting on there, creating these works. And I take 4 with me wherever I go. And I painted in the Dominican Republic. I painted off of Cozumel, Cancun, Hawaii, all around the world. And I'll be doing the same off of the Big Island and on a community called Kona. And I'll be meeting with some families there, some Hawaiian families as well. But I really feel good about these paintings, and so it's a way for the work to keep progressing in a new manner. Next, please. And there's my little studio on the lanai. This is probably North Shore, Oahu. And again, I'm bringing this up because I'm trying to share what I really have deep feelings for. And when you have these feelings about the land and the sea, then you're able to articulate issues of value and equity through public art interventions. But you have to have an anchoring and foundation in the planet. Next, please. And speaking of interventions, my first public art piece was in New York City in 1982. I was coming out of the Shamarapo Reservation. I was living on that land I spoke of, the Red Earth, west of Gary, and I was chosen as an artist to work on the computer billboard at Times Square. I think there were 10 of us elected for this commission, and so there were very important artists: Keith Haring, Jenny Holzer, Barbara Kruger, Hans Hocke, Billy Sullivan, Jane Dixon, David Hammonds, who have since become, some of the main artists of this century of art. And so I created a message that had 8 different complete cells or pages. And so Tatistas, Cheyenne speak of Viho, and Viho, spider. And so I went through a series of delivering phrases about what the Viho does. Viho trap you, Viho catch you, Viho wrapped up, Viho fenced in. And then at the end, it told you that the Viho is a spider, Viho is a white man. And so I went to New York to articulate what the white man was. So I rarely go forward to articulate what I am and what Cheyennes are. I think that's been a misnomer that we're here on this planet to educate everybody about Indians. I think what we need to do is educate the society about themselves. So I went to New York to talk about the white man. And so in the traditional language for many, many hundreds of years, the Cheyenne tribe called the white man a spider. And they did it before he made fences, before he made roads and grids across the planet. But they knew he was going to do that, and so they called him a spider. Okay, next, please. My first native host project was in, again, New York City. This was in 1988. And again, I'm coming out of Oklahoma. I'm coming out of Gary, Oklahoma. I'm coming out of the Arapaho homeland, and I'm traveling to New York City. And there I find myself a guest of the Mohawk Nation. I'm not the Indian to talk for everybody. I'm just a Cheyenne man who lives in Oklahoma, and I'm going to come there humbly to be a guest of the tribes, 6 Nations, Shinnecock, also Onondaga, Tuscarora, Warpo, Seneca, Cayuga, all these tribes, Mohican, all these tribes that are in New York and are often overlooked. Mayor Koch was mayor, and then he felt he was the host of New York, and I differ with that. I think the tribes are the host of New York. And so my first expression of native hosts was to turn New York backwards and have them look at their past differently, and then to acknowledge Mohawk people as the hosts. And so there were 12 panels that were created to be placed in front of Mayor Koch's office. And so 6 were censored, and I only got to put 6 up in 1988. Okay, next, please. I also work with students. This is at the University of Utah, Salt Lake City. And very importantly, Nucci was articulated by the students, the word Nucci. And so often we use the native host panels to correct the mistakes of the white man. Almost all the words the white man uses for tribes are wrong. And so there's no Ute word. The real word is Nucci. So I asked the students about that. They gave me the guidance. And so we placed this up in front of their student headquarters on the campus of the University of Utah. Okay, please, next. My son and I went to Florida, to Key West, and he's also a photographer. He took that picture of the tree I showed you earlier on the mountain. And so I did a series of native host signs, about maybe 5 or 6 in Key West as part of an intervention project, and honored the Calusa tribe. And here we were able to intervene at the home of author there in Florida, Hemingway. And so that's at his house. Okay, next, please. And this is where the boat comes to shore, to Key West, and so we put a panel there. And so when the context is all the issue with these works, and so we were able to put it where the tourists come into the area as well. Okay, next. One of the more recent projects was at Crystal Bridges, and often my interventions are such that they are intervening temporarily, and then half the time they become permanent, as you have there at KU. They're permanent pieces in front of the Spencer Museum. I have 7 panels that are permanent along the trail at Crystal Bridges. Really a fabulous museum everyone should visit in Bentonville, Arkansas. And there I researched tribes from the area of southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, northern Mississippi, Alabama, and so forth, Tennessee. This particular phrase is a Cheyenne phrase that will talk about how we acknowledge all Native people. And then they would say this too, like if you had a powwow or something and you wanted to call in people to eat first, the visiting tribes, they might pronounce this forward and say, come and eat, everybody that's from another nation of Native people. So we acknowledge all the Native nations in this particular panel. Okay, next, please. This was done in Norman, Oklahoma. I was a professor at OU for 30 years, and it was very difficult to be a professor at OU because of the racism that's kind of embedded in the university. First, they have a sower, a statue of a man sowing seeds, but he actually had an army that came to kill many Indian people. The Custer came to kill us. So it wasn't a gentle settlement. It was a very militaristic, violent settlement that killed our people and put our leaders in prisoner of war camp in Fort Marion. So the Sooners was another insulting racist epitaph that the land run, when they came and took the land away and made their farms, they were called Sooners because they stole it sooner than they were supposed to steal it. So I turned the Sooners around backwards to run them back the other direction. And I made about 10 of these panels along Boyd Avenue by the president's home, and made a panel for every professor that was Native American that I knew. And this is the Cheyenne panel in front of the Jacobson house where the Kiowa Five lived. Okay, next, please. This is Julia Bagani, who has passed, but she was my elder advisor from the Tongva Nation. And so this is the mountain, Jote, the mountain next to Pitzer, Claremont, California, the ceremonial mountain, and she identified, I think, about 24 ceremonial locations of springs and rivers and mountains and rock art sites and so on, all throughout Los Angeles basin and into the mountains. And so we acknowledged all those ceremonial places and turned California around backwards to have them see the past differently, to see these Tongva spiritual sites by Hollywood, by Santa Monica, by all these places that no one thinks of as being Native American, but of course they certainly are the Native sites that we should really honor. And so Julia was my guide with this project, and I made the blue paintings with, and I showed the blue vase as well from Murano as well. Okay, next please. And we took the work downtown to a gallery space in the downtown area of Los Angeles and put them up. So we're, in a sense, when we create this work, we're reclaiming territory in an honorable way and acknowledging the true host of the land. And I believe in that assessment or that kind of mission, sometimes that's where we become confronted with violence. And so we've reclaimed parts of Lawrence, Kansas by placing those tribal panels out. And maybe some of the students got angry. They didn't want to have Native people make a claim to their own territory, and maybe they were violent against my work because the power was shifting. They saw it as a shifting power situation, that the tribe should not be publicly visible, forcibly making claims to territory. And I feel like we should be able. We are going to do that, and we have been. I have been doing that for over 30 years, and will continue to do so. And so it's something that they need to really kind of get used to it. That tribes will be more forthcoming with their expressions, and we do have title to all this territory called Turtle Island. Okay, next please. We've done so in the Virgin Islands, and of course the Virgin Islands has 3 islands that are the USA, St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas. And so I did a residency at an art center in St. Croix years ago, and I made panels to honor the Taino and 5 other Native tribes. And of course, they're overlooked in a grand way by all the tourists that come on the cruise ships. And so, but I find this a pretty humorous kind of panel. I've given these panels to artists to utilize in the Virgin Islands. They put them up as guerrilla activities, and so that's important too. That you can make public art on your own with no sanction, with no budget, with no people letting you do it. You do it yourself and do it in the face of the power. And so we put this up with a cruise ship when it came ashore, and they have to have a new reckoning as to where they are on the planet. They have to look at the tribes as an entity that they need to confront. And so that's in St. Croix. Okay, next, please. I also did 20 panels in Anchorage, Alaska, and I believe the number was 20. There were 20 Native nations in Alaska, and I had an advisor there, and more than one, but he gave me the names and showed me the locations, and so we honored all the tribes. And so in this case, Anchorage is a very difficult, kind of violent place for Native people. It's a homeless place. It's kind of a Skid Row, tough place like Oklahoma City was. And so I honored actually the tribes that were on the street too. I put them up by where they hang out by the bus stop, and so it goes into other ways of honoring tribal people. It's not all grand and pretty. It's people on the street that are having dysfunctional lives, and I think they appreciated seeing that. They appreciated seeing their tribe, and often tribal people take selfies next to their panel, and it gives them some prideful moments. And next, please. And here we have the call panel, the first one that was installed at the Spencer, and it was a snowy time. I came up there to give a talk years ago at KU, my former school for undergraduate studies. Okay, next, please. And I also honor other tribes in other ways. I'm certainly very aware of the Trail of Tears. I live in Oklahoma, so we have many tribes that were forced here by walking from Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, so, Seminole, Creek, Yuchi, all these tribes from the southeast. And so I made a series of works in Atlanta along Peachtree Street, where the tribes came from, and I made them as kind of pseudo no parking signs. And I put them up, and I had about 10 sets along the street. And so my perspective, my idea was to sort of talk to the citizens of Atlanta and tell them the parking is over now. You can leave now. You've run out of parking time. You can vacate. And so I made these sort of fake parking signs talking about the Trail of Tears and put them up along Peachtree Street in Atlanta. Okay, next please. This is a brand new billboard. It was done last year around the election time. And I find it very odd. This is when President Trump was in power, making all kinds of horrible immigration determinations. And certainly all the laws that are written about immigration are written by foreigners. No natives write these laws. And it's so ironic they think they can make a law when they're the foreigner. Okay, next, please. This is the most recent work I have in terms of public art. This is a billboard in Switzerland. And again, I talk about context. And so the context is really about where you place the work as well, the power you can have to place the work. This is in Switzerland. It's about a Swiss artist named Karl Bodmer. And the text reads, Swiss Bodmer captured his Indians from their Missouri homelands, set us free. And so Bodmer came to the USA to make paintings along the Missouri River, 1830s, and he made all these paintings of all the tribes. But the irony is that he keeps being exhibited. He had a show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He had a show in Switzerland. He's shown over and over and over, and so has an artist named Catlin. And so the Catlin and Bodmer show many more times than I will or any native artist will. So they actually erase native artists, and so they're seen as native artists because their content is supposedly native, and so they replace us. And so I'm talking to them and saying, set us free, quit showing their work in lieu of showing native artists' work. Okay, next, please. My project right now, I was in Santa Fe last week, and I print in Santa Fe. I have a studio, and I did a project called Tribalized Matter. It's a series of 48 monoprints, and they're 22 by 30 inches. And it's very political, in your face. I'm very much have a lot of desire to counter or discuss Black Lives Matter, but I'm here to say that tribal people have lost millions, 100 million people on this hemisphere, 100 million people. So as far as brutality, violence, erasure, tribal people have suffered the most and continue to suffer in major numbers, from the boarding school murders and missing and murdered women across reservations. It just keeps growing, and we have to fight back. And so I created this project called Tribalized Matter. It's 24 primary prints and 24 ghost prints, and I articulate ghost prints as the second pull from the plate to make a ghost image. And the ghost image is how I feel America sees us, as faintly viewed, not very clear, not very strong, and almost invisible. And so I make a ghost for every piece I create and hang them side by side in a big matrix. So pray, protect, preserve, tribal lives matter. Okay, next please. And that's a ghost print for the Sand Creek, Washita River, Fort Robinson massacres. And that's the second pull. So it gets that buffed out kind of feeling, kind of fainter feeling. And that's how I I sense that America sees us as just barely, so I counter that with the one you saw before, stronger, broader image. Okay, next, please. And this is about the Pequot. I've worked a lot with the Pequot Nation in Connecticut. I did an intervention there with the Wadsworth Athenaeum Museum. And they actually took the heads off the chiefs and put them on stakes by the road to the town to Hartford. A very hideous, violent act. And so yeah, tribal lives matter. Yes. Okay, next, please. And my determination certainly has to spell out that natives survive in spite of the empire. The empire is fighting us this moment. It's all around us. It's above us, below us, beside us. But we'll survive in spite of it, and we'll survive for two reasons. Next slide. We'll survive with a ceremonial life, the belief in the earth, the allegiance to the earth and the sea and the sky and the wind and the animals, the stars. We will be close to those entities. Next slide. And we will survive with our families. This is my daughter, Desma Lightning Woman Heap of Birds, 12 years old now. My wife, Shanna Ketchum Heap of Birds from the Dene Nation. Her PhD is in performance studies from Middlesex University in London. A very important art writer. So together, we survived. My daughter has been involved with the puberty ceremony of the Dene Nation in Kayenta, Arizona. So we will survive in spite of the empire. Okay, thank you. I'll close with that.
Wow, thank you so much, Edgar. That was really amazing. Again, I'd like to ask everyone, if you have questions, to enter them into the Q&A chat. We want to send out a specific invitation to students of Haskell University or Kansas University to send in your questions. You can answer anonymous, or you can ask them anonymously, or you can let us know a little bit more about yourself. We do have some questions already, and so I kind of wanted to maybe take it back to the kind of beginning of your talk, which was a lot about your relationship with art and what inspires you, your relationship with nature. So I was wondering, we have a question from Miranda from Haskell, who was wondering what sparked your initial relationship specifically with art, with painting. And you discussed how you began with your Noof paintings, but did you have some teachers or elders prior to that who kind of encouraged you into visual art? Or what was that kind of, how did that kind of come about?
Well, I started being involved with art as a grade school student in primary school. And actually, I got a scholarship in third grade to an art institute. And so drawing is where artists usually begin. But I was very fortunate to be in Wichita, Kansas, and I was there last night. I was there for 3 days at Wichita State University, and we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of Black Bear Bosun's birth. Black Bear Bosun's very important mentor and artist in Wichita, Kansas. He was my mentor. I knew of his work, so he was very important to me. And I had good art professors at KU, also in high school I had good art professors, and later in graduate school, I encountered Vito Acconci, a very important performance artist and poet in New York City. So I've had a lot of good relationships with mentorship to help my art. Also, Dick West at Haskell. I knew Dick West as well.
Great, thank you so much. You talk a lot about, or you talked about something really interesting. This is actually my own question. And you drew this connection between nature and then abstraction, particularly abstract visual language. And I thought that really was striking because typically abstraction is kind of associated with the unnatural and trying to be as unreal as possible. So I was wondering if that's something you ever consider, and if you're interested in kind of going against that not that normal kind of statement about abstraction in your artwork, or if this is more just your personal kind of understanding of abstraction. Obviously, you talked a lot about how you're just so inspired by the land, and that's kind of part of being native for you, part of that identity for you. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, certainly, my necklace is a Plains tribal necklace, and it's going to reflect on the horizon as imagery. It's going to reflect on mountains. So even the word abstraction certainly is generated from to be abstracted from something else. And so you have a mountain which might be like a triangle peak, but then it could become a shape like so, or it could be a medicine wheel about the stars, and so I think all these forms have an origin. But if you don't live in the earth and are aware, you don't know the relationship of the origins of these shapes, and so even the star systems have origins in contemporary art, and so that's why. And the fish, I showed you the fish and the coral. You can probably start to see my paintings, and not that I'm painting in the ocean or watching fish and painting, but all these things are kind of subliminal in your mind, but it comes from somewhere in your own life with a personal, direct relationship with the earth.
You're talking a lot about getting this inspiration from nature, and you're traveling, you're meeting all these different people. Christiana Johnson from Haskell was wondering, what is your one true motivation to keep creating these kinds of artworks, whether it be your paintings or even we'll get into your reclamation signs as well. What is something that what is it that's really motivating you?
Well, I suppose certainly my family, my extended family, my tribe. As I mentioned before, I mean, being in Anchorage and seeing the homeless Native people on the street and the violent life they have, you've got to say something. You got to make something for them. We have to participate in this society to try to help. And so a lot of my motivation is from a social justice standpoint. And we have a lot of trouble on my reservation. There's a lot of poverty, a lot of dysfunction everywhere because of the poverty and the violence against the tribes. We're still recovering from the Sand Creek Massacre, from the Washita Massacre. It'll take us, hundreds of years to recover from that. Wounded Knee Massacre. So people are still hurting from that. So as artists, as learned people, we've got to help that. We've got to spend our energies to try to help that situation. And so I'm always motivated by that.
And part of your social justice activity has also been starting some social projects, especially an endowment at the KU Visual Art Gallery. And so I wanted to invite curator Susan Earle, if you wanted to ask Heap of Birds some questions about that.
Thank you, Logan and Edgar. Thank you so much for such a beautiful talk. That was really, I learn more about your work each time I read more or hear you speak, and that was just so meaningful. Thank you, thank you. You and I have worked on the acquisition of your native hosts here at the Spencer and KU, and we're so honored that it's the common work of art this year. And you did mention to me your what I see as your incredible continued investment in the University of Kansas as your alma mater, and which is just amazing. So I heard a rumor about continued investment in the visual art department. Is that something you can share?
Yes, certainly. I want to, yeah, I'd like to talk about that. And I had, good years there at KU, and I was also the president of the Student Council of Native Students, and I worked to help recruit students. And I went to Haskell and set up a table at the student union and met with students and talked to them about KU. And I took classes at Haskell with Dr. West, and I played basketball with Coach Postoke at lunchtime, in the Haskell gym, and I like to play basketball. And so I really felt, a kinship certainly with the school there, and attended the school a bit. But there never was much of a of a pickup from KU, and KU has really not performed very well over the decades of time to address the other college in town. And so we want to have more Native students attend University of Kansas. We want to have more of an allied relationship with the students. We have a professor, Norman Akers, who's Osage tribal member, who's a professor at the University of Kansas in painting. He's one of my colleagues in the art world. So I've been doing very well. I've been collected with my work has been collected by the Museum of Modern Art. It's been collected by LACMA in LA, the Tate Modern in London. And so with that kind of wealth, I've endowed a special gallery at the University of Kansas in the Department of Visual Art. And so it'll be now called the Edgar Heap of Birds Family Gallery of Art. And my brother, Guy Heap of Birds, attended KU. My sister, Charlene Heap of Birds, attended KU, and I did. So 3 of the 6 kids in my family attended KU. And I graduated, and I've gone on and done a lot of activities from that experience. And so I really want to encourage more Native people to come to the university and to take control of what they need to take control of and make it a better place. And the art school will be a starting point for that if they're interested. And so forever there'll be our name, the Cheyenne name, Heap of Birds. The chief, Heap of Birds, was living in the 1800s. He was a prisoner of war after the massacre at the Washita. He was imprisoned in Florida. He died in Florida. He did not come back to Oklahoma. So his name will be on the gallery, and the endowment is such that the profits will forever support a Native American exhibit at KU for all time, forever. And so that's what we're going to have. And Norman Akers will be the first artist to show in that kind of realm. I'll be helping him. I'll show a little bit of my work, and that'll be in January of 22.
Wow, that is stunning, amazing. Wow. I mean, that's just quite extraordinary. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that about it.
Okay.
Logan, you may have more questions.
Yes, we do have more questions. Thank you. That is all so exciting. And I think that is a really great way to enter into some other questions that we have. We have a question from an anonymous member of the First Nations Students Association who wanted you to maybe talk a little bit more about what you view the role of art, specifically Native art and Native artists. What roles can they play in affecting political/cultural change? Maybe what effects from your own work have you seen in the communities that you visited? If you could talk a little bit more about that kind of that part of your work.
Yes, I see that art is an action. I mean, I think if you're really doing your work properly, it's a direct action for society. It's not to replicate something and to make money on something or to entertain somebody. That's a different kind of art. I'm talking about art that, like what I just showed you tonight. I mean, some of the printmaking I've been working on. That's not going to maybe please anybody. It's not trying to make friends or something. And so I feel it to be, if you're really worth your salt, you're going to make an action with your work, and you're going to fight back. Like the magazine cover over my shoulder is Art in America, and I challenged all the Native artists to do not dance for pay. Don't entertain the white man with your work. That has got us nowhere. We've been doing that for hundreds of years, and where are we? We're not doing very well. So you don't want to dance for pay. You want to kind of, in a sense, attack. I mean, you want to have an action. And so I see art like Wounded Knee, taking back Wounded Knee, the uprising at Wounded Knee. That's an action. That's like art. So I hope that we can move ahead to continue to create work that has that kind of effect on society. And it's all possible if you just work at it.
Yeah, I definitely hearing you talk about the panels personally now, I realize that you seem to be really interested in kind of the irony of particularly getting the white man to kind of have to enjoy the artwork or look at the artwork and be forced to deal with it. I was especially struck by the U.S. Virgin Islands one, which is kind of a tourist attraction for the white man. At the same time, this kind of this action against that system. I really appreciated that a lot. I appreciate that a lot about your work now. So I was also interested in some of these questions we have coming in about materiality and medium. Chelsea Baird and Ann Totten have both asked, could you talk a little bit more about your use of specific mediums and techniques? Is the materials that you like to use, is that inspired by your interest in nature? Or is it sometimes more maybe just what works for the installation at the time? Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, it's more of a kind of a pragmatic approach. I mean, I assume the power spokesperson persona when I make my signs. So I'm kind of replicating the power of the government to say something, and then I say it differently. And so people think the government's talking, but it's me. But there's a sign, and so I use official sign materials that are utilized, even if we're making an interstate highway sign. The same company that makes my signs makes all the I-35 signs that go down the highway. So I use the official material for those kind of works. And then in the printmaking, I'm very much on the edge of printmaking as far as the cutting edge and new materials, solvents, inks, papers. And we make the best. We have the best printmakers. We have the best materials, the best paper in the world, the best ink in the world, the best process in the world. So we really do the best that's possible to articulate the fine art experience. So it kind of runs in very different stages of fine art, intervention art, and then my painting. Again, the best acrylic paint you can ever buy on the planet, the best wood panels, and all these things. We get the best materials, but it's like having the right hammer for the right job or the right tool for the right job. You don't take the paint and make a sign with it. You don't take the sign and make a painting with it. You get the right material. Or my sculpture in Denver is a 50-foot outdoor sculpture. It costs $500,000. It's got great, 14-foot tall galvanized steel armatures and of course and porcelain cooked panels on the outside, and cranes lowered these in the ground, and there's cement footings, and there's all these things are very elaborate and necessary. So I'll use whatever I have to use to express myself.
That's great. So I guess we'll probably have time for like 2 more questions. So there are a lot of students who would like you to make a comment on the vandalism that occurred in September against your work. It has been noted by many people that this is actually the second time, I guess, that such a thing has occurred against your artwork. So students are particularly interested in why you think your artwork gets targeted in this way, and what you think would be the best way. What do you recommend Native students particularly do to respond to these kinds of crimes?
Well, the first thing is that public art is a dialogue, and so studio art and museum art indoors is not a dialogue. You can't walk in the museum and write on someone's drawing and make a rebuttal, right? But outdoors, you put it outside to get a reaction, and so it happens in many ways. Sometimes it's could have a violent reaction, or people tear it down, or graffiti on it, or something. And but in this particular case, and also at the University of Illinois, I believe that we were really speaking back to a power structure, particularly at Illinois. I mean, they were very much about their mascot, and the mascot got outlawed by the NCAA, and they were angry they couldn't have an Indian mascot. And so I did a piece called Beyond the Chief, and so they actually brought in real life existing Native chiefs to speak at the university. So there wasn't a mascot. It was a real chief that represented a community. And they didn't really like that either, but they wanted to have their kind of make-believe mythical native experience, and so that's not appropriate. And at KU, I think the common work of art may have had a play in that, where they weren't ready to accept maybe a native talkback as a primary source for study, and to actually put something in the ground on campus that's going to articulate, define sovereignty of tribal people, which is unusual. It shouldn't be unusual. You know, I mean, you have statues all over campus, and very rarely are they ever Native American. They're always a non-native founding father or donor. So they're not used to having art to articulate other races of people. And they think the school is a white place, I suppose, which it kind of is, but that's not appropriate. So we, with the signs, as part of my outlook, is to go there and let the nations hold forth in an honorable way. And that wasn't acceptable to some students. But I think what I've been very, very impressed with, of course, sometimes the adversity brings together a great alliance. And I think we had a wonderful response. And that's why I sort of stayed away. I wanted, you know, the students to carry the day. And I really believe, in my experience, always, if public art, if it's good, the community will embrace it and defend it. If it's not very good, they won't care. You know, so people did show a care. Students at Haskell and at KU, native and not native, and faculty in both places, seem to come forward to support and defend and reinstall and guard these expressions, which are just tribal entities, and it's not mine. It's not really me. I'm not in it anywhere. It's not, my name's not on, you know, there in a sense. It's the tribal heritage and sovereignty that we're defending. So in some ways, the adversity brought together an alliance that I'm very proud of, and I hope it continues. And I'm proud that the work is there to stand on for many, many years.
Edgar, on behalf of all of the hosts and partners of this evening, we want to thank you sincerely for your wonderful talk, so illuminating, your very generous engagement with our questions. There were probably more questions than we had time to ask, so we appreciate your generosity in inviting additional questions to come to you through your website. So anybody who would like to continue a conversation is welcome to do that. Thank you for your generosity to your alma mater. And we are so pleased to have the native host permanently installed in front of the Spencer Museum of Art. Such an important work of art that, as you said, prompts important conversations. And so we really appreciate the conversation this evening and look forward to continuing it amongst ourselves and with you again in the future. So I'll finally say that this lecture will be available as a recording if you want to come back and watch it again. So with that, thank everyone for participating, and especially you, Edgar, for being with us this evening. And good night.
You're welcome. All right.